Welcome to UpYourStack podcast. I'm your host, Noah Berk. I'm also the co-founder of the OBO group and elite HubSpot solutions partner. Every week, we feature some of our favorite HubSpot app developers who've either built their apps on HubSpot or integrated with HubSpot to help get the most out of your HubSpot tech stack. Now, today, I have a very special guest. He is not an app developer building on top of HubSpot. He is actually with HubSpot, and we have Scott here. Scott, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Noah. Excited to be here. And I love the show, featuring on apps in the HubSpot ecosystem.
I'm honored to have you here because this is your domain. And for all the listeners, obviously being in the HubSpot ecosystem, I've known of you, Scott, for years. I've known about you and the work you've done. But for listeners who may not be familiar with you, maybe if you can share a little bit more about yourself and your journey to get to where we are today.
Yeah, I think the short version is started life as a software engineer myself, an entrepreneur. Became very passionate about the intersection between technology and marketing. Ran an ISV in the MarTech space for years. Launched a blog, Chief MarTech, 16, 17 years ago. Focused on that intersection. Launched the MarTech conference around that. And then had the great pleasure of joining HubSpot 7 years ago because as that MarTech landscape, I suspect a number of listeners may have seen just what went from hundreds to literally thousands of all these different MarTech apps. All this innovation, but it lacked. And so after many, many years of putting a bug in the ear of Brian Halligan and Dharmesh Shah, they invited me to join HubSpot all right, let's see if we can help HubSpot provide some center of gravity to all those amazing apps that are out there. Yeah, been here at HubSpot 7 years ever since.
And Scott, I personally have been watching those MarTech maps grow. I still remember when you could actually tell the logos of each and every brand. And there was only maybe 5 or 6 different cluster topics. And so that's really cool. What led you there? So you were talking to Brian, you're talking to Dharmesh about kind of the ecosystem and how to make it better. So what do you do in your role now as the VP of Platform Ecosystem? Is that technically still the role you have?
Yeah, my boss asked me this exact same question. What exactly do you do? So there are 2 parts of this. You could also think of it as the product partnerships organization.
Yeah.
Probably the largest group of that is the support for our app partner ecosystem, which is about 1,600 partners at this point. And this involves, we have a partner management function for direct relationships with partners. We have a series of partner programs, some of which are focused on how do we help partners take advantage of new extensibility, new product developments, and then how do we help partners with go-to-market opportunities as well, too. We do a lot of collaboration with the developer relations team. We do a lot of collaborations with a partnership marketing team. If you were to squint, about half my day is spent, frankly, on internal meetings and alignment and strategies of how do we keep collectively growing the HubSpot ecosystem, both across what's possible from a product perspective, but then also how do we get better at telling the story and helping our sales and CS reps leverage this ecosystem, helping our solutions partner channel ecosystem leverage this ecosystem. And then the other half of my day is meeting with partners, new partners, old partners. It's one of the best parts of the job is just getting to see so much of this innovation, it's a front row seat, because it's not just what these companies are building with their integration to HubSpot. It's the vision of what they're creating with their product and their company, and to have the connection to HubSpot be one thread of that. That's just really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I would be curious, how would you describe the current state of the HubSpot ecosystem? What are some of the most significant changes you've seen over the years?
Well, I think the biggest sets of changes here, first and foremost, has been on product extensibility. HubSpot started as a great product. It was a great marketing product. Before Marketing Hub, it was just like HubSpot. The company really invented the whole inbound marketing playbook with that. And then as it grew, it added in what eventually became Sales Hub and Service Hub, and these things are all connected under a common CRM platform, which has been fantastic. But for many years, the focus of our product teams was really on what features do we need to build for customers. And it was really only about the time that I joined that HubSpot had started to dip its toe in the water, saying, I guess there are other things out there in the MarTech sales tech stack that people want to do. Let's open up some APIs. Let's be able to share some data around companies and contacts, which is a great place to start. But you realize something like a CRM platform has so much potential if it really is the center of gravity around which you're helping to orchestrate the larger tech stack, the larger digital operations for a company, that there's so many things you actually want to support in that extensibility.
Correct.
And so I would say for a number of years, just being completely candid, I was mostly just like advocating, please open up some more APIs. And they're like, yeah, we'll get to that next, that in variable next. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe
Then,
down the road we will, but guys, our upmarket clients need all these applications.
no, because everything you want to do in an ecosystem starts on the foundation of the extensibility. But a couple years ago, HubSpot hired Karen Eng, who's my boss, and she's the SVP of platform partnerships. And that really marked a turning point for the HubSpot ecosystem where she put the stake in the ground and said, no, we're going to unlock integrations by opening up a lot more APIs, a lot more extensibility. And so took about a year for that to sink in. But then this past year, oh my goodness, like it has been a flood of new extensibility. And I know we're, doing this right before inbound. There are some amazing things coming out of inbound that
I know you're eager to
not
share
right now, or
can't.
they will shoot me. But I think, if you're coming to inbound or you're watching online, you will see what some of our app partners are now able to do with this new extensibility. And in all modesty, I think it will blow your mind.
And I think it's a necessary, especially both from your perspective and Karen's perspective, is necessary to increase that extensionability, especially as upmarket clients. How many, I bet, Scott, you can probably answer this question, like how many apps are in a typical company's tech stack? Are we talking 20, 50, 100, 200? A lot.
Yeah, and it varies. I want to say, I got to be careful with the numbers, but I believe it's been.
We won't hold you to
plus. Surprisingly, actually, Wall Street actually pays very close attention to these things, which I'm actually very glad they do. I think it's smart that analysts are now tracking these public companies by, what's happening with their ecosystem? But anyways, like whatever the average is, say it's around 7 apps per customer. The truth is, like, that might be a mean. But when you look at the distribution curve, it's something where, okay, you have a whole bunch of people just getting started. Maybe they just plug in an app or two. But then you see on the other end of the spectrum, like these larger companies or these much more technically sophisticated companies, that is not all unusual for them to have 10, 20, 30 integrations. And that's really then, I think, the sign of, okay, now you're not just on the edge of the solar system, hopefully playing nice in the solar system, but you really start to be like that star at the center of the solar system that provides the gravity to, talk about overextending this metaphor. Anyways, more and more things
I was following.
Like integrated, I think, it really gives you a sense of, okay, this is where we're really starting to add a lot of value as a platform, not just as a product.
So you had mentioned earlier with Karen's hiring, it was a kind of a driver for growth. Was that one of the key drivers for the HubSpot ecosystem? Was it organic? What would you say are some of those key drivers you've seen for the growth of the HubSpot ecosystem?
Yeah, I think certainly Karen, to me, was a very clear, strategic shift in the prioritization of the platform and the ecosystem. I would say part of what got HubSpot in that direction is, we were just talking about this, HubSpot's origin story was phenomenal with small businesses. In fact, it really was the all-in-one for the small business, kind of everything you need in the box, get rolling. And actually today is still very effective at that for small companies. But as HubSpot succeeded at that tier and started looking at, okay, it's great, we're good for these smaller businesses, but as they start to grow, we want to keep them. We don't want to lose them. So how do we support companies with 100 or 200, or now it's up to 1,000 or 2,000 employees? And one of the things that becomes very clear when you start engaging with those sorts of customers is integrations and extensibility is not some hypothetical, that would be nice to have there off on the side. It's like a mandatory requirement. They will not purchase HubSpot if it will not integrate with the applications that they already have that they consider essential to their business. And so as HubSpot started this climb to supporting these more upmarket customers, the feedback just came through loud and clear. It's like the same thing. There's also the go-to-market side, and that was also one of the things that changed, is basically as more and more of our sales and CS reps kept hearing directly from prospects and customers how important this was. That made them actually much more excited about, let's go see what's in the app ecosystem. Let's talk to the app partners. How do we start to win more of these deals together?
Yeah, and what do you see as the most like untapped opportunities right now in the ecosystem? Perhaps things that you're working on, or perhaps things that you're hearing from customers that they're looking for. What are these opportunities, either now or into the future?
Oh man, there's so much. Part of it is so inside the space of like marketing and sales tech, we are in a constant race of evolving expectations from customers. There's constantly new channels, there's new tactics that people try. This is the nature of it's been the nature of digital marketing for 25, 30 years, where, as soon as someone figures out a tactic that's effective, suddenly everyone else starts trying to do that tactic too. They actually have a
Yep.
law for this. It's called the law of, well, I'll say crappy click throughs. And it's just like all these things over time, once they become a standard, their efficacy starts to drop. And so clever marketers and growth hackers and all these are always looking for what the next one is. And we have so many new technologies and channels that keep emerging for customers and consumers. And so in that regard, I do feel like the MarTech sales tech space around HubSpot continues to be an evergreen opportunity for, emerging technologies, emerging tactics. But in many ways, that is just the first layer of the onion. When you start really looking at how your business runs, marketing and sales don't exist in a vacuum, right? They're connected with the product you run upstream. You've got things going downstream into like your customer success delivery, the way in which your finance team is like evaluating customers, customer lifetime value. And as you start to realize that, okay, wow, to really run marketing and sales and customer success effectively, it's about integrating these data and services from across the company. So again, having integrations into things like accounting platforms, or being able to make sure that, if you have a business that is like a web app or a mobile app, that the data of behavioral interactions on those apps are getting properly captured and piped into a marketing environment where you can say, here's this cohort and let's reach out to them, and how are they doing compared to this other cohort. There's just so much that you start to connect. And to me, that's always the key part of an ecosystem around a platform, is how do you get more of those adjacencies?
It's really interesting because as many customers as I talk to, I feel like a lot of them are unaware of the app ecosystem. It's one of those things like they're like, hey, can we integrate with this? And it's like, have you looked into the app ecosystem to see, is there integration? What is that? What is this thing that we're looking at right now? I guess one of my follow-up questions are, what do you envision for the future of this app ecosystem over the next 3 to 5 years? What versus where it is now and where it's going to be in the future?
It definitely sounds like one of the first things we could do would be to promote it better. If you've got a bunch of customers who are like, wait, they have an app ecosystem? Then I'm like, okay, memo to marketing.
Make sure they bring it up at inbound. We have an app ecosystem. Check out some of these apps
Yep. All right.
on
That
the
seems like a
floor.
good place to start. I guess what I would say is, I think we are still very early in the journey on the extensibility side.
Mhm.
Again, I look at what people have been able to do from an extensibility perspective, and it's supported a lot of use cases. But there's so much more we could do on like the user interface and what sort of extensibility could exist around that. I think there's so much we could do around the data model. The CRM, the core CRM, has had a relatively narrow set of fixed objects. I think we live in a world where we can think of data in a much more varied sort of way. And so I think as we start to unveil more of this extensibility to support that, boy, I think the number of use cases that people will be able to imagine and bring on to HubSpot. There's a set that I've always been really excited about. We have a few examples today, but I think there's so much more potential, is around this idea of vertical industry applications. All these different industries, don't get me wrong, they benefit from a lot of this sort of horizontal marketing, sales, service technologies. But every industry starts to have some of its own unique data,
Correct.
some of its own unique processes, some of the own unique channels and the way they engage with people. And I think this is one of the areas where there's a lot of greenfield ahead. As we have greater extensibility in HubSpot, it will be more and more feasible for folks who have like a super specialized app for, say, like, hey, this is the app for how we do this in the energy industry because people are looking at this, or hey, listen, I'm in healthcare. There's a certain set of applications we need to integrate with, and then how we want to run these processes. That I think as we start to unlock the extensibility for those use cases, Whew, yeah,
Just the
the
way it opens
sky's the
up.
limit because again, we started talking about that MarTech landscape and the thousands and thousands of MarTech solutions. The truth is, it isn't just MarTech, right? You look at any industry, any category, any vertical, and the same thing is happening everywhere. There's just an explosion, thousands of software apps everywhere. We won't go down that rabbit hole too much, except simply to say that, yeah, once you start connecting some of these other categories and some of these other verticals, there's just such a rich depth of potential applications that could be connected in an environment, in a platform like HubSpot to bring more value to them, more value to us. That, yeah, I can't wait to
What
see what the horizon brings.
And what do you see coming first? Is it, let's take one of these vertical industries like healthcare, maybe it's an EHR system. Is it they're waiting for customers to come on to HubSpot first before building their integrations? Or is it they're building their integrations with the assumption their customers are going to be in HubSpot? Are you seeing one way or the other, like chicken or egg type approach?
There's the easy way and the hard way. So the easy way is if you have a prospective partner and they already have a number of their customers who are also HubSpot customers, that is the easy way. And then you're like, okay, here. In fact, actually, if their customers are already demanding, hey, can you integrate this to HubSpot? Boy, that makes our job so much easier. We're like, yes, happy to help. Of course, when we started the ecosystem, it was a different story. It was the case that HubSpot was very much the underdog. It didn't have the scale in the marketplace it has today. And so in a lot of cases, we were working with partners to help them take a bet on HubSpot. And I'm very happy that for those who did, it's paid off actually very nicely. But it's a lot more work to be like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's why we think this will be a good match. We bring whatever data we can industry wise. We obviously provide as much support as we can to get it launched. And so I think the same thing will be happening as we start looking at these vertical markets. And some of them, yeah, I suspect actually there will already be a pretty high overlap and it'll be pretty easy to make a case of, oh, and here's now what we could do together that grow your business and our customers. But I suspect there will be others who will be less so. And we will have these discussions for, okay, who wants to place a bet on the future of this?
You had mentioned earlier there's about 1,600 apps in the HubSpot ecosystem, which I think would blow most people's mind. But in reality, 3 to 5 years from now, are we looking at double that, triple that? Or is it quality over quantity? Is that even a metric that you guys measure, is how many apps in the ecosystem?
People tend to look at the number of apps in an ecosystem as a signal of ecosystem health. It's a naive view, but hey, people do it. And so I can't say we're like completely blind to the concept of, yeah, okay, yes, more apps is better than less apps. But the truth is, when you're actually talking to individual customers, the number of apps very quickly isn't what's important to them. What's important is the apps that they want. Do they exist inside the marketplace? I don't care about the other like 1,500. I just want to know if the 24 that are important to me are there. And so for a lot of it, our focus is on the constant research of, for HubSpot customers, what are the apps that they want to integrate?
Yeah.
And then it's, for that matter, even more important than like getting other apps to fall outside of that circle. It's okay, for the apps that are important to them, how good is the integration? Because integrations are one of these things that it's so easy for us to get in a mode of like treating it as like a black and white. Does product X and product Y, do they integrate? Unfortunately, in today's world, the answer is almost always yes. Heck, I can get Zapier. The question is it a great integration? Does it help the use cases I want? What's that experience like for our staff? What's it like for our customers? And there, the reality is integrations have an incredible road of how deep you can go. And again, being fair to so many of our app partners, a lot of the limitations on how deep these integrations could be were on our end. We just didn't have the extensibility to make them deeper. But as that is now getting unlocked, I would say, yeah, the quality and the depth of these applications and these integrations is going to be more important to us than just, oh, can we double the number in 2 years?
So one of the challenges is, and I talked to a lot of different app partners as they're building apps or integrating with HubSpot. You call it a fear, but is HubSpot going to just build that capability? For example, like if they're working on this HubSpot, how do you balance we're going to build it versus simply focus on the integration? Yeah. And I think of text messaging as an example right now. HubSpot is really investing heavily in text messaging. There's several text messaging apps out there. How do you balance the two?
It is the hardest part of this job, and it's not unique to HubSpot. Basically,
Yeah.
every major horizontal platform has this challenge. In fact, right, Apple has now given us the term Sherlocking. There's no easy way around this. I guess I would say if you step back and you look at the logic to it, there's one answer. And then there's a question of, okay, even given that, what do you do about it? So the thing you got to
Yeah.
step back is what matters to all of the partners in a platform ecosystem. Is that platform going to be the top platform? Or is it going to be one of the top two platforms?
Yeah.
Because the worst thing you can do is build on a platform that is basically not going anywhere, that it's losing its market position. And so collectively, it is very much in the ecosystem's interest that HubSpot stay where the expectations are of customers of, hey, my core platform needs to do X. Your competitor does that. This other competitor does that. And so I think HubSpot is hyper focused on what matters to customers. And when there's just clear demand from a set of customers, yeah, we expect this as a core functionality. HubSpot has to do that. That's if we
Yeah.
don't do it, we're not going to win the customers. We're not going to keep growing. And again, it absolutely sucks. I don't mean to make light of it. If your app happens to be on that border, though, and it's your specific app that's being incorporated, that just sucks. I completely
Yeah.
get that. I've been in that place myself as an ISV in previous ages of life, too. So then the question becomes, okay, that's going to happen. Like almost any platform that's really competing to be number one in its space, it's going to happen. What do you do about it? The two things that HubSpot has tried very hard to lean in is one, we try not to surprise anyone. There's always risk, and there's particularly once you start talking about things like M&A, that's particularly hard to give people a heads up on that. In general, if we know we're going to build something, we basically will reach out to our partners who are the leaders in that space and we'll give them a heads up. You never want anyone to be like surprised on an inbound or something like that and be there eagerly in the audience. And then Andy Peter is up there. Yeah, you just,
You're
no,
like, what?
no. I want them to know, and I want them to be able to have a chance to think about like how they're going to respond. The how they respond is actually interesting because this isn't true for all features, but for a lot of technologies out there, again, it's not a binary, does it do this or does it not do this? There's like a whole scale of how these things can work. Text messaging is like a fantastic example of, can I send a text message to someone is like one thing, but how do I organize campaigns around this? What's the content? Do I have these OS responses? How am I routing this? And the reality is for many things, even when HubSpot does start to encroach upon a certain piece of ecosystem functionality, it very rarely is going anywhere near the distance that the companies who are built especially for that capability do.
Correct.
And so that's the other thing to lean in there. But then what I advocate as much as possible for with our HubSpot teams is to say, okay, fine. You're building in this functionality, understand why you need to do that. But we do have these partners who can take this a lot further. Are there things we could open up from an extensibility perspective that would then actually make it easier for those partners to take something further or to be able to swap things in here where they need? Our track record on that is mixed, but it's something I'd like to see us get better at because, hey, technology keeps changing.
Yeah.
None of us can stand still. But what we want to be good partners with is when things aren't standing still, we want you to know that we still want you to succeed in whatever we can do within our power to help that and help you find that path
Correct.
forward, do the best job we can.
Do you feel like companies nowadays are trying to shrink their tech stack? Like to them, the motivation is an all-in-one. I don't need to go buy this app. I don't need to buy this app. The tool has it all for me. Or maybe that's just a particular type of customer. Maybe a size of customer is like, I want all-in-one versus a larger customers. No, give me these sales enablement features over here. Give me this capability over here. I'm just going to get best of breed and bring them all into one. What's the future, an all-in-one or a tech stack that continues to grow as the organizations grow? And maybe there's different answers for different sizes.
Yeah, I mean, well, in different maturities of companies and where they feel competitive pressure. The reality is it's a spectrum. I don't know that there's any one strategy. I've been writing this Chief MarTech blog for 17 years now. And I would say the majority of people I've engaged with in that world have actually been larger companies and more enterprise enterprises. So I see this a
Yeah.
lot. And it's interesting because they have both sides of it. On one hand, very clearly finance departments, procurement departments that are like, crush this down. At the same time, they have a very clear sense of what are the specific capabilities they need. And I think most of them find a very intelligent balance of, I like to call it right sizing your stack.
Yeah.
You don't need one product that does every possible thing your company could ever imagine. Because as it turns out, at scale, that's actually really hard. We'll see. Maybe with AI, we'll get to the place where there'll just be one software app and it'll be the HAL 9000 and it'll just do it all for us. In the absence of getting to that stage, I think you still have this thing where, okay, yeah, no, this is our core, but this is this other more specialized capability we need. And in those cases, what really is important is we want that to work with the core platform. We want this stuff to get orchestrated. And so I don't know, looking at the space as a whole, is there constant pressure from every single software company to justify your existence? Yes. And I don't care how big you are. Like, that is just a constant question you can wake up with every morning. Yes, here's how we justify our existence. But on the other side of it, yeah, I think we are a long ways away from, the tech industry, particularly in marketing and sales, just homogenized down to a single product.
And I think there's obviously unique use cases for individual products. And you mentioned it earlier within HubSpot, it may not go as far as some of these other apps are able to go in terms of their expertise and knowledge of what they're trying to do. Take like quotes, for example. It's not the same thing as a fully built CPQ solution. I know companies are working on that. They have CPQ solutions. And I'm not going to ask you, Scott, is HubSpot coming out with a CPQ solution today? I'm sure that's for inbound conversations, even when that conversation would happen. But what is interesting is companies ask partners all the time, especially solution partners like ourselves, what apps should I include? Because they just don't know. And this goes back to the very top of the conversation. Companies either not familiar with the platform ecosystem or not even familiar with how to search. And especially when you have 1,600 apps, it's hard to sometimes know what each of these do. What's your recommendation for companies who want to educate themselves to learn what else is out there? Obviously, your MarTech blog is fantastic, but what other methods do you encourage them to do to educate themselves in the app ecosystem?
I'd actually take it from the other perspective. And particularly, I think for solutions partners, they're uniquely poised to be able to do this, which is talk to clients, talk to prospective clients. It's funny, although I've got a known for that like crazy MarTech landscape. When I originally started that Chief MarTech blog, it was not to be like, I love tools. Look at all the tools, more tools.
I thought that was you, Scott. You loved them all.
It really was starting from this question of like, how do we change the operations, the marketing organization and environment where so many things can be digitized? And how does that change our process? How does it change our strategy? How does it change the talent makeup we use? And all of this, it really, from my perspective, starts with the question of, okay, what are you trying to do with your customers? What are the competitive alternatives that exist along that line? Mapping out this journey. And like, the more you understand what are the different pieces, there's this great model, I forget the name of it, I want to say might be associated with service design, but it's this sort of metaphor of front stage, backstage. Is you're mapping out, say, the customer journey, where there's the front stage of what are the interactions that we're having with the prospect and the customer. And then backstage, what are some of the interactions and processes that are happening internally to be able to support that? And as you start to go through that journey, I think that's where you've, first of all, identify where people have a bunch of applications that they're using today for this. And so if you want to connect that journey, you're going to want to think about how you connect to that app. But you also start to understand like the pain points and where do they run into scaling and what are the things that they wish they could do at those particular moments. And that gives you some sort of direction to then be in a position of, oh, okay, what are my choices for a technology that might be able to assist with that? Don't get me wrong, feel free to like pour yourself a glass of wine, spend an evening just browsing the HubSpot app marketplace. That's what I do. But usually,
I mean, I do that too, Scott, but most people are not just sitting there hanging out. But I think you bring up a really good point. As much as solution partners asking customers, I also think as customers asking their own teams. What apps have you used in the past? What apps are you using for this? It's like when we draw tech maps, we're showing all the technologies they have in their ecosystem that the company is currently using, what's integrated with what, where are things being used. And I definitely encourage all listeners, if you're out there, ask your company or ask team members, what apps have they used before? What apps are they using now? What are their use cases for them? Also, what's the return? In other words, what are you expecting from using these apps, and what type of return on investment will you get? Simply having more technology does not necessarily mean greater efficiency. It has more to do with how you're leveraging that technology to be a force multiplier for your team. And I always use the phrase force multiplier. And there's a lot of apps out there who are fantastic at saving time or fantastic at helping you interact with customers better. Kind of, Scott, my last question for you is, what are you most excited about HubSpot these days with the direction they're headed? And are there any specific developments? And I know we're coming up with inbound, so you may not be able to share, or shifts that you find particularly promising or exciting.
Well, don't miss the inbound keynotes, because there's some really cool stuff coming that way. Yeah, I think it's just doubling down on this idea that if we look at it as, I don't know, what's the baseball metaphor? Innings.
Yes, you're in early innings.
Yeah, to the bottom of the third inning here. I think the new extensibility that HubSpot will open up here over the next year or so is going to, like, by orders of magnitude, expand the canvas upon which people can add value on top of the HubSpot platform, whether that's integrating an existing app that perhaps from an even further adjacent category or a vertical market or something like that, but also people empowered to create things that perhaps exist entirely on top of the HubSpot platform. I think as long as you take the assumption that, okay, the way in which businesses run, the way in which they do sales and marketing and service, if you can take the assumption that, okay, this isn't done, this is static, this is over, this is just the way we'll do everything from now on, thank you very much. Oh my God, with AI and all this, like, we could barely even scratch the surface of how all these interactions and processes are going to change over the next few years. And I think all of that's going to be a huge opportunity for the ecosystem. And what am I looking forward to most of all? It's like a front row seat to watching that next generation of innovation, and frankly, just doing whatever I can to help support it.
Well, I think you also mentioned something earlier that's really important. HubSpot's a platform, and it's becoming more so, where you can do more things inside this platform. Hence part of the change of pricing around core seats, where people are not necessarily using it for sales, a service, or marketing, but something else within the platform itself. And to your point, opening this up will give them more capabilities, more data, more opportunity within the platform, which is beyond exciting. So I can imagine, one, I know we're not measuring how many apps are in the ecosystem, but I imagine a lot more companies in individual verticals, especially with now the ability to have sensitive data housed inside HubSpot. There's your healthcare, there's your financial services, there's your insurance industries that you just could not leverage HubSpot to its fullest potential until you can start storing that data. Scott, this has been an awesome conversation. I am so happy to have you as a guest today. And by all means, Scott, are you presenting at Inbound? Because this episode is going to go live before Inbound. Are you at any speeches or any talks there?
I am at Inbound. I think I'm speaking on Partner Day, but for the rest of Inbound, it's nothing but meeting partners. So yeah, feel free to have anyone reach out to me, and yeah, happy to see them and say hello. I was going to say grab a cup of coffee, but after about the 25th cup, yeah, I might just catch fire.
Just put water in that, Scott. Just put water in your coffee at that point.
Let's come and have a glass of water together.
Yeah, Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This was awesome. I'm sure my listeners and our listeners will absolutely love it. And listeners, thank you again for joining us today. And that really wraps it up. Of course, you'd like to learn more about Scott, find him on LinkedIn, find him at Inbound. He'll be around. And if you're interested to learn how to level up your own HubSpot, feel free to reach out to the OBO group. Again, brought to you by UpYourStack, helping companies and organizations really get the most out of their HubSpot tech stack by talking to companies who either built their apps on HubSpot or integrated with HubSpot. So again, Scott, thank you so much for joining me. And that wraps it up.